Alright, this lesson is on memory storage. And when we're talking about storage of memories, we're talking about retaining that neurally coded information that we encoded over some period of time. Now, there are a few different theories of how we store memories, but the one that's the most popular is Atkinson and Shiffrin's model called the information processing theory. And this is the belief that you're probably most familiar with, that we have 3 levels of processing. The first one that you may or may not be familiar with is called sensory memory. The second is what you're familiar with, short-term memory, and the third is long-term memory. And you can see that as information comes in, it goes into our sensory memory and it continues through the other 2 levels of processing. Our sensory memory is the preservation for just tenths of a second of information that we have in its original sensory form. So anything that we see, anything we hear, smell, taste, touch, we can have for tenths of a second, we can have a memory of that smell, of that sound, whatever it is. And if it's not important, if it's not anything that we need to attend to, then it will be forgotten. But it is put into our memory for a millisecond, if you will. Well, I guess that would be 100th of a second, so tenths of a second, you figure it out. But anyway, sorry about that. Our sensory memory comes in 2 forms. We can call, or there's a lot of them, but the 2 that we know of would be iconic memory and echoic memory. And if you just use your thinker on this, you all know what an icon is. We use them all the time. We've got them in on the computers all the time, icons. So an iconic memory is going to be a sensory memory of a picture image. Echoic memory, think of the word echo, and it's going to be a sensory memory of an auditory stimulus. Here's the thing, with echoic memory, it's really kind of fun. You know, the students that the teacher says, okay, so-and-so, what was I just saying? And they repeat back the last sentence or phrase or whatever that the teacher just said. And the teacher sometimes can be like, oh crap, they were paying attention. Or the student can be like, I got them. But the educated teacher who knows about echoic memory, and now all of you who know about echoic memory, you can get the student by saying, okay, and what did I say before that? And it's very interesting because you'll notice that they have not a clue. And so that echoic memory, within 3 to 4 seconds, we can repeat back what we just heard, but anything beyond that, and we're pretty much done. Our short-term memory. This is where most of our memory, we feel like, resides. We feel like we don't have, when we're trying to learn new information, it doesn't get stored very well into our long-term memory. It just kind of sticks in our short-term memory, and that does happen sometimes, I understand. But it's also called working memory. We'll get to that in the next slide. But it's a limited brief storage system. And the idea is that we can maintain information in our short-term memory for up to 20 seconds if we're not rehearsing it. Okay, if we're rehearsing it, we can maintain it indefinitely. Think about, you've gone to the phone book or wherever you go now to get a phone number, and you have to remember it until you find a phone. All right, so you got the number 780-4765. That's the phone number of my church. 780-4765. Okay, so you continue to repeat it over and over in your mind. 780-4765, 780-4765, 780. Can I borrow your phone? Okay, and you keep saying it over and over again, and you can keep that going for as long as you want. I could walk all the way around the school. As long as I keep saying that to myself, I'll remember it when I get to a phone. But what happens? Somebody distracts me and says, hey, Mrs. Hall, can I blah, 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 and I've just lost it. And I got to go back and go look up the number again. So, but that is our short-term memory. We can maintain things in our short-term memory as long as we keep rehearsing them. And that's why you guys always want to take your quizzes so quickly. Quick, let me take it before I forget. Okay, that's not the point of learning, really. I mean, a phone number, sure. But when you're talking about real learning, you want to put it into your long-term memory. It's believed that that we can store the magical number 7 plus or minus 2 items of information in our short-term memory for up to 20 seconds. Now we can increase that number of items by chunking the information. So think about a phone number. Okay, so I'm going to say 7593207. Okay, if I were just to say those numbers like that, you'd have a hard time remembering all those numbers. But if you chunk it, 7593207 or whatever number I just said, it was something I just kind of pulled out of my butt, then you can remember it for a longer period of time. And so that's why we actually do our phone numbers that way. We chunk into those 3 number sequences and then the 4. Our working memory, Alan Badley came up with the idea of calling short-term memory actually our working memory, and he believes that it has 3 components to it. The first is the visuospatial sketchpad, the second is the phonological rehearsal loop, and the third is the central executive component. Now I want for you to think about a server taking orders in a restaurant. Okay, the really good servers are the ones who can listen to your order. They can take your order without writing it down. Now they are really good and they do deserve higher tips than those who write it down, but I want you to hear what they're doing. If you understand what they're doing, you realize, hey, anybody could do that. When they are taking your order, let's just say that you have ordered I don't know, a salad, whatever. So you want the taco salad minus tomatoes with extra tortilla chips and a little extra salsa and sour cream. So what that server is doing when you place that order, the server who's been there long enough knows what those meals look like when they bring them out. So what she's doing, I'm just going to say she, what she's doing is she's creating a mental image using her visuospatial sketchpad, and she's making a mental image of all the plates on the table and what they're going to look like around the table. So if she's taking, let's say, 4 orders, okay, and I've just ordered the taco salad, and she's making a mental picture of what that taco salad is going to look like with all of my additions and deletions to the main taco salad. And then she's going to do the same thing for the person sitting next to me, and she's going to keep rehearsing that using her phonological rehearsal loop as she walks back to the kitchen or to the computer or wherever to put the order in into the computer. So she's going to keep repeating it to herself, and she's going to keep looking at those things around the table and making sure she's got the order right, and she's going to put it in the computer, and then it's gone. Now, what screws her up is when she walks by the table next to her and the person there says, hey, excuse me, could I get a little extra water or with some ketchup or something like that? And she says, oh yeah, sure, just a minute. And she is still rehearsing that order that she's just taken and taking it back to the computer, and chances are, if she's really good, she'll remember the water, but chances are she'll forget that water and have to be reminded because she didn't really attend to it because she was distracted by the other things, because keeping that order was the most important thing to her. The central executive component is the coordinating component. So for that specific task, the central executive is the one that's making all the things happen at the same time. All right, long-term memory. This is where we want our memories to be stored. The things that are really important to us, we want to be stored in long-term memory. We're not even sure how long we can store information in our long-term memory. We're thinking possibly indefinitely, but we don't have enough information. We haven't done enough research on this, but it's believed as of right now it's a virtually limitless capacity and has relatively permanent duration, with the exception of some sort of an injury or disability that could occur. We're going to talk more about forgetting later in the week, but the question is, possibly is forgetting only due to the inability to retrieve information? We're not sure. Is that what forgetting is, or is it not there to begin with, which would be an encoding failure? We never really truly encoded it, so you're not really forgetting because you never encoded it in the first place. Was it ever really stored? So we're not sure on this stuff. One type of memory that we know is in long-term memory and it stays indefinitely is called flashbulb memory. Now, flashbulb memories are those memories of something that is emotionally significant. And it caused us so much emotion when it occurred, or when we found out about this event or whatever it was, that we can remember details about that moment when we found out. Now, it used to be that we could do September 11th, and maybe we still can. Maybe you guys can still remember where you were, who you were with on September 11th, 2001, but I know that as time is going on, students, high school students, are not as familiar with that as they were when it had first occurred. As we get older, these flashbulb memories tend to occur more often, especially with tragedies like that. But maybe you remember where you were when you found out Michael Jackson had died. Or if I were with you right now, I'm sure you'd throw something out about a memory, but maybe you will remember for a long time where you were or how you found out about the New Haven tragedy in Connecticut. Or I know if you were to ask your grandparents, or even perhaps your parents, where they were when JFK was assassinated, they would know. And they would be able to give the details. A couple others for some older people would be when the O.J. Simpson verdict came out, or when Princess Diana died. But you can think of other things that you have as flashbulb memories. But what you're able to do is you're able to remember the details. You can see it almost as if it's a photograph. Now, over time, it begins to decay. You don't remember all the little details. But I'll tell you, the biggest one for me is September 11th. Okay, September 11th, I can remember, I can see it in my mind, where I was, I even know what I was teaching, okay, because I was putting in a video. I was teaching classical conditioning, and I was putting in a video, and the TV came on. We saw the picture in New York. We didn't think a whole lot of it. We weren't sure what it was. It just was news, the kind of thing. We watched the video for about 10 minutes, and in the meantime, my dad came in to the classroom, and he said, "Did you hear what happened in New York?" And I said, "Well, I saw something, but I'm not sure what it is." And so when the video was over, I popped it out and we put it back up, and sure enough, another plane had hit the other tower, and we left the TV on at that point. It was pretty incredible. But I remember some of the students who were in my classroom, and I wasn't in the classroom I'm in right now. So anyway, I've talked about that too long. But we find that human memory is not as accurate or as reliable as we assume it to be. We don't have any convincing evidence that long-term memory is permanent. We don't have any convincing evidence that forgetting is simply an inability to retrieve. So there's still a lot of things that research that needs to be done on this. When we look at long-term memory, I'd like to talk to you about some different types of long-term memory that we have found to exist. The first is called explicit memory, and it's made up of 3 different types of memory. Explicit memory are memories that require intentional recollection. You've got to really think about it. It doesn't just come back to you. The 3 types are declarative, episodic, and semantic memory. Declarative memory is storage of factual information. Recollections of words, definitions, dates, faces, events, anything that's factual in nature. You remember what various words mean. You remember concepts. You remember someone's birthday. You remember what someone looks like, or when the next Taylor Swift, did I really just say that? Taylor Swift concert is. I'm trying to make this like a real lecture for you. Episodic memory, this is storage of chronological recollections. Things that have happened to us. This is an order or sequence to it. If I were to ask you, what'd you have for breakfast? You'd have to go back in your mind through a sequence of events to go back to breakfast to remember what you had. When was your first kiss? Okay, tell me about your first kiss. Well, you're going to have to go back. Some of you guys I know have never been kissed. I'm sorry, it's okay. You got lots of time. But go back in time, and you've got to think about, I know some of you too, it just was yesterday, your first kiss, and no, your mom doesn't count. Okay, so let that one go. But You got to back it on up. If I ask you about your family vacation, okay, it's chronological. It's personal things that have happened, and it's chronological in nature. The third type of explicit memory that we have is a semantic memory. And this is storage of general knowledge. It's not really tied to when it was learned. You don't even remember when you learned it. It's rules, it's objective facts, things, definitions of common words like very. You know what a dog is. You don't remember when you learned what a dog was. It's the memory of just basic general knowledge. Bananas are yellow. There are 12 months in a year. I mean, do you remember when you learned that? Do you remember when you learned what month comes after the other? Be sure to ask me questions if you're not sure on some of these different types of memories. Finally, implicit memory. Implicit memories don't require intentional recollection. They can just come back. They can just come to us whenever. The one type of implicit memory that we talk about is called procedural memory, and this is where we store skills and how to perform them, like how to ride a bike, how to long jump, how to brush our teeth, how to drive a car. They're things that are automatic. You don't have to think about how to ride a bike, some of us. Or it can be one of those things that you haven't done it in a long time. Anyway, that would be a procedural memory, the procedure of how to do something. Now what I've given you here is a flowchart of the different types of memory that we just learned in the storage lecture. So make sure that you ask me any questions that you've got about any of these different types of memory. Yes, I know that the declarative memory is in a different spot than it is in your outline, but I can answer questions about that on Friday if you can't figure that out.